Hello, world, and welcome to Choices Books and Gifts, where you always have choices. So, we are starting the second series of a four-part series with Leda Mitrofanis, and she is going to go through a second book with us today. It's a four-book series, but this is book two. But I want to tell you a little bit about her. So I'm going to read a small bio, even though I did that in the first one as well. But in case you're tuning in for the first time, you will know that she's already done one podcast with us already. And she's going to do a little recap for us after I finish reading the bio. So thanks for tuning in. Leda Mitrofanis is an insightful author and though leader in personal growth and self-discovery. Her Human Case of Mistaken Identity series explores identity, self-perception, and the journey towards self-love. Her first book, Me, Myself, and I, examines how our experiences shape and sometimes distort our sense of self. In her second book, which we'll be covering today, Self Love, The Journey Home, Leda guides readers on a transformative path to embracing self compassion and finding a sense of home within themselves. With a background in psychology and a committed to empowering others, Leda's work offers practical wisdom to help readers cultivate, authenticate self love, and unlock their true identities. Good morning, Leda. How are you?
Good morning, Jay. Thanks
It is
again for having
always
me
such
on.
a
It's nice to see you.
it's always a pleasure to see you and your smiling face. And before we get started, I was hoping that you could, you know, just give a little where we're at and what happened before.
Okay, so I know you always want me to show the books when I
I
start. So,
do. Thank you. Thank you for reminding me.
reminder um,
Yes.
book one, which is Me, Myself, and I. I don't know if you could see that. I'm
Yeah,
sure
right
they'll
in the
see.
middle. Perfect.
And then book two
Just
is
closer
Self
to the
Love,
lens. There we go. Yep. Go ahead.
The Journey Home. And thank you. Our first session was great. And I
I
think it's
apologize and I want to interrupt for 1 second. So these can be purchased in anywhere you purchase books, Amazon. You can go to Leda's website. You can go to my store. All of these books can be purchased in these places. Go right ahead.
Thank you. So I think it's important just to do a quick recap
Yep.
that we talked about. For those who haven't yet seen the first video, I encourage them to do so because the books are written to take you on a journey. Step one, two, three, and four, right?
Understood.
And the two are out. The third is in the works. And just as a quick recap, we discussed in our first, and jump in anytime, we discussed in our first chat together that the first book is the introduction book to the series and sets up the stage for the following three books. And it talks a lot initially about our current state of the world and the social media effect on our lives, both current and long term. And as the ultimate self branding tool, social media has led us on a path to constantly look externally, meaning outside of ourselves, for who we are and how we should be in the world. And this has subtly and slowly caused us to move away from our own inner wisdom and authentic sense of self. And when we do this, we are actually giving our power away and we become codependent on all of our external influences for a constant validation. And it puts us on this hamster wheel of codependency that really doesn't serve us and causes an internal emotional roller coaster,
Okay.
right? And what it does is it brings it as it crowds out our sense of self. When we focus on only our external environment, it brings up to the surface all our insecurities and all our core wounds, right? Which are feelings of I'm not good enough, feelings of I'm not worthy. And we find ourselves in this inner turmoil where we're constantly trying to figure out who we are, right? Because innately we know that our human social conditioning is not who we truly are,
Okay. Well, thank
right?
you for summing.
So it
Okay.
basically sets this up and it tells us that our spiritual identity is our true core essence, that we are so spiritual beings having a temporary physical existence and not the other way around, and how we can take that and work with it tangibly in our lives.
Good.
Right. So that was our first discussion. I know it's like a quick recap, and I strongly suggest everyone go back and listen to the first one to really get into the more nitty gritty of it.
I'm sure they'll do that if they're interested. And like I said, this is interesting stuff, so it's terrific. So, self love, the journey home. My first question to you on that
Mhm.
is how does self love, the journey home, build on the themes of mistaken identity introduced in the first book?
So, book two focuses on the core fundamental principles of unconditional self love and self acceptance. And these fundamental principles are the key to healing these core wounds that are brought on by our human social conditioning. And there are five fundamentals. They are radical self honesty, knowledge and self acknowledgement, which is knowledge of the self, radical acceptance of the self, self trust, and self forgiveness. And in the book, and we don't have the time to go through them here, but in the book, I talk about them in detail and what they encompass. And I also give them the spiritual perspective on all of these, because as we are working with our both spiritual and human existence, I try to incorporate and have people understand how each one operates and how those can be brought into integration and balance with each other. So it teaches us that, most importantly, it starts with breaking down the differences between authentic self love and false ego validation, which we kind of touched on before, which is brought on by our human social conditioning, right? It's who we think we are, who people have told us we are, who our culture tells us we should be,
Cool.
right? And it teaches us how to recognize and unravel these differences so that we can, and it's inaccuracies, so that we can come back to a more authentic place of living that's in alignment with who we are individually, right? Because that looks a little bit different for everybody.
Cool. Thank you for answering that question so thoroughly. All right, question two. What is the journey home metaphor about in the context of self love?
That's a good question. So it's twofold, actually. Home, when we say the journey home, we're in essence talking about our spiritual identity, because it is the core of who we are. When, many times we're born and raised in a certain place, right? A certain geographical location. And we've lived there for all of our early years, let's say hypothetically. Or there's one place that you've resonated with most. You always say, I'm going back home, because those feelings that you have from home mean it's a place of love. It's a place I resonate with. It's a place that I'm free to be who I am internally. And so we take that home to meaning our spiritual home. But it also means coming back into our own wholeness, right?
I
It's
got you.
taking
Like
all
the
those
inside.
fragmented pieces of ourselves and bringing them back into our wholeness. Because in essence, when we return to the true core of who we are in our human state, it's the same as our spiritual essence. They're one and the same,
Very good. Very
if
good.
that makes sense.
It all makes sense so far to me. Third question. Why do you think self love is such a challenging concept for people to embrace?
So the short answer is because we are not taught to.
Okay.
Our this false sense of this ego validation exists on the surface of life, right? But true self love requires going through those five fundamentals, beginning with we could take radical self honesty, right? And it's very challenging for people because it means that you have to tell yourself the unfiltered truth about yourself to yourself.
Hmm. Hmm.
And this is challenging because we all have parts of ourselves, which we call our shadows, that we've disowned. It's the parts of ourselves we don't want to look at because they bring up guilt or maybe shame or other emotions that we don't want to deal with, that we don't want to go to, because they make us feel bad about ourselves, because they create pain. There's pain there. And a lot of times we don't have the coping modalities we don't know what to do with the pain and how to heal it. So we'd rather just push it away, avoid it,
Hmm.
pretend it doesn't exist, and go on with our lives. But the way it works is they're constantly tapping you on your shoulder and they constantly resurface because the way to heal them is to sit with them, to look at them, right? And then to say, okay, where did I pick this up from?
Yeah.
If there's something about myself I don't like, where did it come from?
And then to
How,
deal with it, you know,
right.
on
But
some level to explore it and then say, okay, how can I heal from this?
right, because in order to heal any of these wounds that are carrying is a practice of forgiveness ultimately. And
Absolutely.
that's a very hard place because we also have a bit of a skewed, if I may say, or distorted version of what forgiveness actually is. And there's quite a few pages just on forgiveness and talking about the different aspects of forgiveness, what we believe it to be, and what it actually is, and how it serves us. And we talk a lot about self forgiveness because no matter what happens to us and what belief systems we've adopted along our life path, those messages that we've internalized, positive or negative, we keep replaying them long after they've been fed to us. And if those belief systems are not serving us well, then we need to forgive ourselves for still holding on to them.
Understood. Understood. Okay. So then, can you explain the connection between self love and identity? How do they inform and influence one another?
Our self love begins in our early years, right? It is the time of our life where we begin to adopt our self perceptions as reflected back to us by our initial caregivers. It's those early years where we internalize the messages that we are receiving, whether they're coming from our parents, caregivers, our early childhood education. We are also in those early years, we adopt our sense of value as it's reflected back to us, right? Because you have to remember when we come in and we're born, we kind of come in a bit with a clean slate and we start to pick up, our relationship dynamics from what we see going on in our home. But all of this is happening subconsciously. We're picking up messages from how we are treated. We're picking up labels. We're picking up stereotypes. It all depends on what that environment for each one of us looks like. And those are where our inner child wounds form, depending how we're internalizing the messages that we're getting. For example, a lot of times parents will say something simple as, be a good boy and do X. Or if you're a good girl, you would do Y, right? So children at that very young, early age, and I'm talking younger than 5, they don't distinguish the difference between doing something bad, whatever that is, and being bad. And our initial caregivers they're our God, basically. They're our model of authority. So whatever they tell us, we kind of take as, oh, okay, well, that's the way it is. So if you're telling me I'm bad, the child internalizes, I am bad.
Hmm.
And I am bad can manifest into, I'm not good at this, I'm not good at that, whatever it could be. And that kind of morphs into our adulthood and forms an underlying pattern. And this is a very, very simple, basic example. And this is not to lay blame on our caregivers, it's just the language. We parent the way our parents parented us for the most part. And a lot of times when we become parents ourselves, we're like, oh, wow, I'm doing what my mom did that I said I would never do. Right. And those are the subconscious patterns that are underlying. So the idea is to become more conscious and aware so we don't repeat those patterns.
Yeah.
But this is not about laying blame. This is just about understanding how these things are created and how our self perception is then created because it's reflected back to us by the adults that are raising us. And
Understood.
those become our identity
Yeah. Yeah.
as we
Like,
move forward.
most things, and when you're a child, you're a sponge and everything, comes in. So, it means so much to us because we are so young and everything is so new to us. So I see your point,
Well,
100% completely.
yes. And also, we create our belief systems in these early
That's what I mean. Yeah.
stages, right? Because our belief systems are handed to us by our culture, our ethnicity, our socioeconomic background, wherever we're influenced and living in, those are the belief systems that early stages we adopt. And as we get older, it's important to understand that belief systems lead to behaviors. Our behaviors are guided by our belief systems, which later form our patterns. So it's important to bring awareness in moments and say, okay, why is this happening in this way? Is this really mine? Is this what I really believe? Or is this just kind of what was handed to me, but I'm going to let it go because it doesn't resonate with me anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't speak to me.
All right. So, number 5, are there any myths or misconceptions about self love that you aim to dispel in this book?
I do. And that is, I would think the most prominent one right now is self care.
Okay.
Self care exists when self love is already present. And what we're doing is the reverse. We're using self care as a way to get to self love. But
Mhm.
self care, many times, is something that we're doing externally from the outside in, as opposed to from the inside out.
Okay.
So it's important in self love to return to those five fundamental core principles. And when those are present in any way, then self care becomes a natural outer manifestation of the self love.
Very cool. Very cool. All righty. What are some of the practical steps you suggest for readers who struggle with self compassion?
Self compassion obviously starts with ourself, and it's about we have a tendency to treat other people much kinder than we would treat ourselves.
I
So I
hear you.
Yeah, so I think the simplest answer here, and I go in this in detail, but the simple answer is take all of that kindness that you would give to someone else and give it to yourself. Being our own harshest critic is not serving us. The same way that you would cut some slack, say, to someone else, is what you should do for yourself.
It sounds like self compassion has a lot to do with, self love. You need to have self love to have self compassion
And self perception.
and self perception. Okay. How does mistaken identity play a role in our difficulties with self love?
When I talk about mistaken identity, I mean when we are living from our false ego, which only identifies with our human identity, right? And when we live from that place, by default, that's living in a world that is outside of ourselves. We are basing our sense of value on our external
Mhm.
circumstances, what kind of car we have, where we're living, how much money we make, what job we have, where we're eating, how we're dressing, right? And those are all things that are fleeting and temporary. And when I talk about giving our power away, when we rely on those things for our sense of value and to define who we are at the mercy of them,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? They then have power over us. And
Yeah.
then our identity becomes much more superficial when in fact it runs much, much deeper. We get our sense of identity from who we are internally, how we perceive ourselves, how we know ourselves to be. We have value regardless of what we're doing in our outside lives. It's inherent. We
Okay.
don't have to get it from someone. We don't
Gotcha.
need someone's approval to have it. It's already there.
It's funny you talk about this question, and I find the most people that I'm attracted to are really, literally, the people that need the least seem to me to be the happiest. That's just something I've noticed over
Right.
the years.
When you have self love, you now choose to live the life that you want, what you're doing, who you're with. It's not based on need.
Yeah.
Whereas most people base it on need because they need something from you to fill a void that's not coming from within themselves. Right.
Okay. All right. Number 8, the book title implies a return or a homecoming. What do you mean by this, and what does home represent for each of us?
So, as I touched on this before,
4, yeah, we did touch on it. Yes.
yeah, so home is coming back to the truth of who we are, to our own authenticity, which is the same as saying we're coming back to our spiritual self.
Okay. And number 9, how important is self love in informing and maintaining healthy relationships with others?
This is huge. And this is going to be the topic of this is my next book 3.
Oh,
So,
great.
when we address our own core wounds, our
Mhm.
insecurities, our sense of value, our self perceptions, and we learn through the process of the 5 fundamentals how to love ourselves and be in our authentic self. The more we are loving and accepting of ourselves, the more we are loving and accepting of the people we are in relationship with. And we are not in relationship with people because we need them to validate us, because we need something from them. And we don't have a requirement that they be something external, meaning have X money, have X job, look a certain way. Those things become secondary when in relationships we start looking for true connection,
Hmm. Hmm.
because that's what a relationship is, and that's the basis of a lasting relationship is
It
true
may
connection.
it may sound so simplistic, but it's almost like I can't love someone until I love myself first.
Exactly.
Okay.
No one outside of you, Jay, can give you more than you are willing to give yourself. They can try, but you will only accept and receive at the level that you're at and able to.
Love it.
Right.
Lady, you're doing such a great job. Okay, number 10. How does one know if they are truly practicing self love versus what might be superficial or externally motivated?
This is why the first chapter tackles straight off the difference between authentic self love and false ego validation.
Okay.
And we talk about the true self, the ego, and the false ego, right? And in short, we know what the true self is. We know what the false ego is now, right? So the
Yes.
ego itself is the actual gatekeeper. That's where our free will choice resides. And that's where in any moment we're always choosing what we're going to do. We're always making choices about, how we're going to behave and what we're going to do. Even if it's subconscious, it's still a choice, right? And it's in that space that we start to hone our skill and learning the differences between true self love and false ego validation. And false ego validation will always be fleeting. It's very, very temporary. And
Okay.
if it's something that you're looking to get from outside of you, it becomes an addiction,
Hmm.
right? I need this drug. What is my drug of choice? What is it that I need to give myself that love, that have somebody see me as I truly am and love me with all my faults and all my shortcomings, and understand that I am on a journey just like everyone else. That doesn't make me have less value. But when I reach for that thing, whatever that drug of choice is, it could be constant validation. It's different for everyone. It means you're not getting it from within you. And that's how you know you're not in authentic love and you need to turn inward.
Yeah. Yeah. I come from a 12-step background, and it sounds so much like, when I hear you speak, like, comes from SLAA or Codependence Anonymous, things like that. With that, it's not so much alcohol or drugs, but what do I need to make me, feel happy as a person, you know?
Right.
And it's
Well, you're looking for that part of you that you feel you're missing, which is
right,
it's that love, that complete unconditional love, but we're looking from it outside, somebody else to give it to us,
right.
but only we can give that to us. That's the mistake we're making. The more we keep looking outside of ourselves, the more it's going to fall short and keep pointing us inward, until
Yes,
we come to that aha moment when we say, oh, wait a second, I can do this myself. I
yeah,
know how to love myself.
yeah. That takes practice, but yes, I agree with
Yes,
you.
yes.
All right. In the book, do you outline any specific practices or exercises to cultivate a genuine sense of self love?
I do. I do that in each section.
Okay.
I give a little bit of how we can do, because I'm building it towards the end of the book. So I give a couple of practices with each component of the book, but chapters, I think 4 or 5, offer exercises. It's just kind of a list of
Ah,
exercises we can do with a little description of each one that we can do daily that will help us to start cultivating that sense of self love and bringing us. It actually is about bringing us into the space of stillness,
okay.
or what you call meditation,
Right.
right? But meditation can be many different things.
Agreed.
And it gives more of an understanding and helps. There are tools to help you get from A to B, because you have to remember it's a process.
Hmm.
It's a
Agreed. Agreed.
process and it takes time.
Absolutely. It takes time. And I don't think you ever reach that total, pendulum. There's always something else we can learn or do and improve in our lives. It never ends, that constant. I mean, it gets so much easier, but I think it's a never ending journey for us all.
Well, yes, because the process needs integration. And this type of integration has to be incremental, because we have to master the first step before we can get to the second.
Okay. All right. How does our relationship with self love change over the course of a lifetime? And why is it essential to revisit?
I don't think we revisit, I think it's ongoing. I think what I would like to share with everyone is that this isn't something you do and then you stop doing and then you pick it up. This is who you are. It's a part of you. Kind of like if you're, for example, a gym rat. You don't think anymore. You just get up every day and you go and you take care of your physical being and your physical fitness. And it's the same way. The process of loving ourselves is incremental, and it as we master each step and as we practice them, it grows exponentially. So yes, it becomes easier, but there might be a time in our life where we get a little bit of a backpedal, if you will, where something happens and we're triggered, but we are not in the same place where we started. We've already grown and learned to a certain degree, and so it does not affect us the same. We're like, oh, okay, I know what to do here now with this kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
I certainly agree with that. I know in my own process early on, it would take me so long to get out of my own head. It was told to me the worst place to be is right in
Right,
here. And now, if I'm in a bad place, I'll tell you, I can get out of it within seconds or minutes from practicing the things that you're talking to us about right here and
right,
now. I
right,
don't have to stay there. I can change like that, and it
right.
usually works.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. How can you share a story, for example, from the book where someone reconnects with self love and how it impacts their life? Now, I don't know if that's a difficult one, but do you have any
I
example?
do use a case study in the book, in the second part, when I talk a lot about our early years. And the reason is because I'd like to draw the parallels and connect the dots of how messages that we internalize, how we're given certain messages. It's sort of like the broken telephone, how we internalize them, how they develop belief systems, and then they develop behaviors and how we carry those into our adulthood, right? So, and I talk about that case study.
Okay.
And so that way everyone can resonate a little bit. I kept it generic so then they can connect the dots.
Yeah.
And then I go on to talk about how we can take all of that and what can we do, what do we do with that? How do we unravel that? How do we heal that? And that's the step into the self love.
Good. Good. I think examples always help us in life.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Especially in this arena.
Yes. 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 In what ways do you think society discourages self love, and how can readers counteract these pressures?
Well, the choice is always ours to what level we are going to be exposing ourselves to our outside influences. And the outside influences will always be there. But it's our job to keep these in balance and to keep who we are influenced by in check. So if we are hanging out with, we talk about the five people in your innermost circle. If you're hanging out with people who are, or in places where there's a lot of negativity, a lot of complaining, a lot of victimhood, a lot
Yeah.
of blaming and shaming, then that is the energy you're going to absorb. And what that's telling you is that you're resonating on some level with that. That's the tool and the teacher to walk away and say, wait a second, why am I in this place? Why do I think I need to be here?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's about a choice. We cannot completely obliterate our out external influences, but we can choose what we let in and how we create our own balance with that.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, once again, I have a lot of 12 step references, and, it's in the 12 steps, they say, hang out with the winners, meaning you want
Mm,
people that have been around, that work a good program, that work the steps. And, it's funny because there's another saying that says, if you hang around in a barbershop long enough, you're going to get a haircut. And what I mean
right.
by that is, you're saying, hang on to the good people in life, the people that influence you in a healthy and positive way, as opposed to hanging out with people that, have bad judgment, that are, make bad decisions and things of that nature. That's what I felt you said.
Well, yes. And I want to offer this exercise. So we are the sum total of the five people closest to us.
Okay.
Take those five people objectively and write down everything you know about them, their pros and cons. And then ask yourself, I'm in relationship with this person, friendship, whatever your relationship status is, and then ask them, how are they feeding me? How am I feeding them? What are we bringing to each other? Are we, when we're together, uplifting each other? Are we helping each other to grow and evolve? Or are we just passing time, or are we just whining about something? You know, and it's not and we're doing this from a place of observation and discernment, not judgment and criticism.
Right.
And this is really key. We're not judging someone, we're observing ourselves, because every one of those five people is reflecting something back to us about ourselves that we're still hanging on to. And we have to decide if what we're hanging on to is what we still want to hang on to.
Yes, yes, yes. Understood completely and agreed completely. What messages or encouragement would you offer to someone at the very start of their journey home to self love? What would I just walk into your office and what are you going to tell me?
I'm going to tell you two things. I'm going to tell you you're not alone. And I'm going to tell you that you already have all the tools and wisdom you need within you to return home to your own authentic self love and self. You already have it in you. It's not about changing, it's about uncovering what's been hidden most of your life that you
Mhm.
just didn't know was there.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
I
what I would
like
say.
that. I like that a lot. Well, we're coming to an end of our second podcast out of four. And I think you did an absolutely terrific job. And you know
Thank
me
you.
by now. And I always ask, is there any final thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I just want to encourage people that it's not the mountain that they perceive it is. That's
Okay.
just a perception that we have. And we really do, we're fully equipped with everything we need to live the life that we're living. And we came in with that innately. And it
Yeah.
really is about remembering who we are and uncovering all of those gifts and talents that we already possess.
I'm
And,
so
in my private counseling, in my sessions, this is what I help everybody do. I help them unravel their wounds, and what doesn't help them sift the wheat from the chaff to figure out who they are and how they want to move forward.
right. And, I love that you brought that up because, so many of us, I know for myself too, in the very beginning, I thought, oh my God, I have to change my whole life. And for years and years, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think the
Right,
whole process was going to take so long. And you just said, it doesn't take as long because you already have what you need. We just have to pull it out of you.
right.
So I really thank you for that, and I appreciate you. And I want to tell the world, thank you for tuning in. I want to tell Leda, thank you so much. And I really suggest you stay tuned for two more of our podcasts. They're going to be fantastic, as good as this one. And may God bless you and look after you always. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, Jay, for having me again.
Always.